So a little while back, I saw a machine that was in kind of an article um, that was hacking this high school and causing havoc. And it happens to be one of those flipper zeros. And I got thinking on it. What would it do to a voter machine? Because they're all, Wi-Fi to some degree. They use a sub-band of the emergency communication system to communicate. So what are your thoughts on a little machine that could potentially make it so voting doesn't happen? Nothing's tabulated.
Yeah, it's definitely something that would need to be looked into, to say the least. And honestly, I didn't know that. I thought each voting machine was self-contained and not connected to anything. So I didn't even know they had a low band Wi-Fi there. So, and reading into that article that you had sent me, the fact that they were able to use that to screw up 3 or 4 different kinds of devices.
Mm-hmm.
That's something they definitely need to get looking into, because it'd be way too easy for somebody to pocket that. And it doesn't even necessarily have to mess it up in any particular way. If there's any kind of worry that something has gone wrong, it's going to throw confidence out the window. And basically any place where that happened, there's going to be an uproar.
Well, I agree. Like, it needs to be tested, not for the fact that you want to screw with an election. It needs to be tested to say, hey, these machines are not safe. And the fact is, they sit there and say, oh, they're not connected to the Wi-Fi. And to some extent, that's true, but not true. It has to have some kind of signal. So when they have the little tabulator and they count up all the votes for that area, it's instantly sent into the database for the state. You don't have a whole bunch of little drivers driving thumb drives all the way to Salt Lake. It's just, it doesn't happen. So they are lying to you, but not really. They're just kind of like hiding the truth that, hey, yeah, it is kind of wireless. It runs off of AT&T emergency band. And I figure if anything's wireless, anything, even mobile, it can be hacked. Even the radios can be hacked. Like, you can have what's called a middleman, that if you know the frequency, you can put a device between, let's say you have A and B, you can put a device in the middle and intercept the signal and say, well, it's not really this Jamaican song playing. It's going to be metal. And everyone on this side is going to hear metal. So it's like, same thing with data.
Yeah.
It's ones and zeros. Someone can manipulate those ones and zeros.
Yeah, without doubt. Do you know what those things are actually meant for? Do they have a purpose?
Security testing, and just like enthusiasts to like do different things. They can open garage doors, act as ID badges, pretty much anything you want, just to test your own systems.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, that's what they're designed to do, is make things break so you can defend against them. And that's why I'm surprised no one's tested them on voting machines.
Yeah, until you brought it up, I hadn't even heard of it.
Yeah, it's just supposed to be designed as a security feature and for nerds, to play around with. But I think if any coordinated effort with a $200 device in each person's pocket, they can go up to multiple people can go up to each county clerk and act as a poll watcher, and no votes would ever go out.
Yeah, do that in 2 or 3 swing states and the whole election's on its head.
Right. And so what if the device shuts down? Like, it can brick like computers and whatnot. So what if it bricks the tabulator that counts the votes?
Yeah, what are you going to do? Bring everybody back and do it over?
Yeah, especially the ones that vote the day of.
Right.
Is everyone going to come back?
Yeah, that's crazy, man. Somebody has to be looking into that, because until you had brought it up to me, I'd never even heard of it. And then I read that story you sent over. It said, I think it affected a computer, somebody's cell phone, and perhaps something else. So that's pretty wide ranging.
the TVs and the projectors. It can turn
Yeah.
them on and off.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it runs off of gigahertz bands, Wi-Fi bands, under gigahertz bands. So like you could do radio. Um, yeah, it does RFID tags. It does infraband. That's what it's meant to do.
Yeah. Yeah. You'd think that there'd be some people looking into it at the very least, but I think we had talked about this before, that there's so many people that are so inept that they may not even see it coming.
No, instead, our leadership, um, I'll say specifically here in Utah, it's Deidre Henderson's our lieutenant gov. And in a lot of other places, they have a secretary of state that runs elections. In this state, it's the lieutenant governor for whatever reason, but it is what it is. She is inept, and they'll spend $500,000 on advertisements telling you the elections are secure and safe. If the government has to tell me that my elections are secure and safe, it's probably not safe.
Yeah, there's something going on there. Yeah. Yeah, and I've paid a lot of attention to it, in the last few years, of course, with what happened in, the last election. It's been top of mind, and I'll watch a lot of or read a lot of news about it, and this never came up once. And like you said, I mean, it's a big enough deal that I'm just shocked that nobody is talking about it, that more people don't know about it.
Well, the mainstream media turn a blind eye to it because they want specific people to win. And so they won't do anything that invalidates or goes against the integrity of elections. They don't want people to second guess their votes.
Right. Yeah, and that makes sense, but at the same time, for people who do know about it, it's a little bit more worrisome, because I know that they've definitely tried in the last couple of years to make sure that everybody is confident in the elections, and this is something that might decrease that confidence. But if they come out and say, "Hey, we're looking into this, we figured this out, we're safe from it, we're good," then that might go a long way towards making folks like us a little bit more confident with it.
Yeah, and they definitely need to do these tests on these devices in public so
Yeah,
people can watch. And it needs to be recorded too, that says, hey, yes, this device does affect it. We need to do some patches or come up with a different way. Or no, it doesn't affect it. Either way, we need to find out, and it needs to be not done in private. It needs to be public. That
absolutely.
way we can all work together to come up with a solution depending on either way it goes.
Yeah,
If it doesn't work, then there's a $200 device that someone just spent on. That's okay. They can use it for other stuff.
yeah.
But if it does affect voting, then that's a small price to pay to find out if your entire elections can be compromised.
Yeah, especially it wouldn't take much. A couple of highly populated counties and a couple of swing states is all it would take. You could probably, wipe out all of the integrity of the election for less than $1,000 with a few
Right.
key people put in a few key places. That's about all it would take. And it makes me wonder if this is the only device, or if there are several like this out there that could also have an effect.
There are other devices that are similar to it out there. And they can, including this one, they can all be highly customizable. Like this one, you can buy circuit boards to customize it and to increase its power and give it specific instructions. They even have like an app store for it,
Oh,
where
wow.
you can go through and just pick different apps. It'll play games. It'll do a bunch of different stuff. And it makes you wonder if someone out there could potentially not just block votes, but change votes. If it's
It
ones
sounds
and
like it would
zeros,
it would be capable of doing it.
and if they can access the frequency that it's on, then what's to stop them from changing ones and zeros to a different set of ones and zeros?
Yeah, exactly.
And then you can, a nefarious actor, you could go to them and say, hey, in this county, we have a big name senator versus another big name senator. And there's already some campaigns out there that are dumping, they're up to like $50 million
Yeah.
in their campaigns. You could turn around to a nefarious actor and say, hey, give me $30 million and I'll make sure you win.
Oh yeah, they'd pay it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, they would.
Yeah. Jeez.
They definitely would.
Well,
Like,
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh, like look at our own governor. He took money during COVID from a no bid contractor. It was only like 75,000, but still, that's corruption.
Right.
And now imagine if someone had access to a device like this and used it for nefarious reasons. It wouldn't be no 75,000. It'd be millions.
Oh yeah.
In.
You know, that makes me think if it is capable, there's got to be people out there with that idea. There's got to be people saying, look, I could totally cash in by doing this really simple thing with a really cheap device and maybe not say anything about it, but figure out how to do it and pull it off.
Then people be none the wiser because, for example, take Dominion voting machines. We're not allowed to look inside the machine. We're not allowed to audit it because it's considered proprietary information, and that's protected by national security.
Right.
So how are you supposed to know if it's being tampered with if you can't even audit it? How do you even know what your vote went for if you can't audit your vote?
Yeah, and anybody inside the company can be influenced. So even if the people inside the company might know, that doesn't mean we know.
And see, someone with a device, even if they're working for the company, could be like, well, I know these machines don't have this or this, but they can do this. So this device would definitely affect it, and I could change all the numbers, and no one would ever know.
Right.
They could pay me $30 million in Bitcoin, and no one would ever know.
Yep. They could just disappear.
There's a whole election just changed.
Man. And just imagine how many trillions of dollars it would be worth to the right person. I mean, to become president, that's, I can't imagine how much somebody would be willing to pay to make that happen. So there's no shortage of motivation out there for people.
The sad part is people like you or I that bring this to others' attentions, we're most likely to get jailed. Whereas somebody that actually does it and does the corruption and does do the nefarious things, they'll just get a slap on the wrist and say, oh, you've been naughty.
Yeah.
But it's unbelievable. The rampant corruption, and that people that are in power just get away with it. And you have a device here that could change whole entire elections.
Yeah.
But what surprises me is no one wants to find out.
Yeah, that's crazy. That seems like it should be top of mind and top of the list.
I've approached a lot of candidates just saying, hey, I want to buy this device, and I approach the campaigns and say, hey, I want to buy this device. I'll take all the heat for it, but I really want to find out if our elections are secure, because I see a lot of these campaigns saying, hey, our elections are not secure, or we need elections integrity. Well, here's one way to find out, but yet not a single one has been willing to do it. Yeah. It's just been all talk.
Well, I think that's kind of crazy with like you said, it's intellectual property or proprietary information, and therefore somebody outside of the company can't look at it. But that just seems crazy to me. I don't know if it would be better or worse to have the technology open source so everybody knows exactly what's going on. But then again, that might make it easier for somebody to figure out how to exploit it. But it just doesn't seem right to me to have a company that's like, oh, we know what's going on. You got to take our word for it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I wish it was open source. That way, as like somewhere on like GitHub or something, where everyone can contribute and you can openly see the changes that someone has made, and they submit it and everyone agrees on these changes, and like the contributors. But if something happens, like say someone embeds a virus, we know who did it. We know who made those changes. Whereas this way, it's proprietary. Nobody knows what goes on. Like we only have in the state of Utah, we have one county clerk that's able to access the machines.
Ah, geez. Which
One.
means that that's only one, you only need to influence one person.
Yep.
Man.
You're telling me that like someone offered him $5 million, he wouldn't look the other way on a few votes?
Yeah.
We're all human.
Yeah.
We can all be exposed to corruption, but we need to work as everyone, even both sides of the aisle, Democrats, Republicans, and everyone in between, needs to come up with a system where it is secure, where we all can say, yeah, this wasn't rigged.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the logs right here. Here's everyone's votes right here. I don't need dead people voting.
Right.
I don't need someone in this county voting 20 times. Right?
Right.
But at least this way it wouldn't be proprietary and there would be logs of, hey, this name popped up here and here. They voted twice.
Yeah, absolutely.
This person tried to manipulate this log. But having it proprietary just means that very few people have access to the most powerful thing this nation has.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's really a good idea to have private companies doing it at all.
Like, how do you trust them?
Right.
How do you, like, okay, so let's say let's just say a county, for example, like a group of people, or even just a small town, right? One person in the town has access to all the votes, and they do it not in front of everybody. They don't count the votes in front of everybody. They count it behind the closed doors. Then that one person comes out and says, hey, this person won. Could you for sure trust this person?
I mean, I would say no. The only thing that would make me be a little bit more confident about it is just because the signature and the social security number, and you can check against it. But then again, if you have something that can manipulate that, what's to stop them from doing it?
And half the time, when poll watchers always have said that half the time they don't even verify the signature correctly. Like, and that's another thing is, for example, a bunch of the people here in Utah have their signatures verified. And in fact, Brett Hatch he wasn't able to get enough signatures. He something got like 40,000 signatures, and half of them were disqualified. Okay. So he didn't hit the criteria to run for office. Well, Governor Cox only got 25,000 signatures, but yet no one will tell us if they were verified or not.
Just not saying anything is fishy in and of itself. I feel like the answer is already there if they refuse to say something.
Right. And Deidre Henderson, she's lieutenant governor. She works for him. She's on his ticket.
Yeah.
Of course, she's not going to verify the signatures.
Yeah, not if it could get her out of a job.
Right. That goes against her own best interest.
Yeah.
And so it's like we need a better system that's not like behind closed doors and only privy to a few people.
Yeah.
That just breeds corruption.
For sure. There needs to be a hell of a lot more eyes on it. And that's why I was starting to think about something that could be open source. I don't know how they could, make it confidential enough that everybody's safe, but still be able to track everything, see all the moves, and make sure that everything's on the up and up. I think a system like that's a no-brainer.
Right. It is a no-brainer. Something that's been mentioned a few times is blockchain technology, to do that with an open source method. And each of us would have our own individual unique blockchain. Like, it's kind of like a wallet,
Right.
You'd have your own wallet and your own unique vote, and there would be a log of everything that happened and who voted for what, but it'd still be anonymous because nobody knows that's your wallet. Does that make sense?
They could still check to make sure there's no duplicates and there's none.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because that's what blockchain is designed to do, is be a verification.
Right.
And so it's still anonymous voting, but at the same time, you can make sure people aren't dead. You can make sure that there's no multiple people voting for the same thing.
Yeah. And being that, the government has access to technology we can only dream of, the fact that they aren't implementing something kind of says something as well.
Right. And then handing the keys over to private companies that have inferior systems.
Yeah.
And like Dominion's not going to want to innovate. They're happy. They get millions of dollars just with their basic voting machine.
Yeah.
They have no reason to change it because it's all proprietary. We can't know the votes anyway. But like, I just think that we need to all work together and come up with a solution that would, present to the people, say, hey, this is one of the best ways to have an integrity in our elections, because right now it's just integrity in our elections is at an all-time low.
Yeah.
People don't trust their votes.
Yep.
And that is what destroys countries.
Yeah. That's where it starts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Have you thought about, well, maybe you already have, reaching out to Deirdre Henderson directly and saying, look, this is what's going on? Or do you think she'd probably just, blow you off and want nothing to do with it?
She'd probably blow me off and want nothing to do with it. She's just as corrupt as Cox. Like, their interest is benefiting themselves. And I'm not saying they're like spawns of Satan or terrible people. They're human. Their best interest is themselves.
And politics seems to do that to people.
Yes. It brings out the worst in people.
Yeah.
It really does. And you can find a few gems in the stones, but for the most part, it brings out the worst type of people.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot about the fact that we have a lot of people, in state or even national positions of power, that they are far more likely to do what will make them be reelected than what is best for the country or best for their state or their district or whatever it may be. And I think that's a shame that is even something that they think about, because they're putting one person, their own career, in some cases over the lives of the citizens.
Yeah, it's true. And in fact, you hear a lot of talk about primaries.
Mm-hmm.
But what they don't tell you is they've done studies on this, and any person that runs campaigns should know this, that since I want to say most of the studies were done in the 1960s and onward, they've had that many years of data, shows that an incumbent, a person that's already in office running for a primary, has a 90% chance of winning.
Jeez.
But
90%, damn.
Yeah, they have a 90% chance of winning. And that's what makes, like, for example, when Trump lost to Biden, everyone's like, wait a minute, he's an incumbent.
Yeah.
That didn't follow. And that's a whole different story, and we can get on all the conspiracies of that. But the point being is, you have if you're an incumbent, you have a 90% chance of winning. And everyone's like, oh, well, it offers the broadest amount of people to vote. But the broadest amount of people aren't always the smartest or the most informed. They have jobs, they have families, they don't have the time to hear about Joe Schmo running for treasury.
Yeah.
Like, they don't have that time. So when they get a vote in front of them, they're just like, well, I've seen this guy's sign, so I'll just, yeah.
I'm guilty of that myself, man. I mean, I pay a lot of attention to national politics, but I don't really pay much attention to local politics.
Right,
and
yeah.
I really need to, because
we're all guilty of that.
Yeah, because I've done the same thing. I'm like, well, this name seems better, and I don't know anything about them. And it's really stupid to do, but I think we're all kind of in that boat, like you said.
Right. And so this is where I enjoy caucuses. Caucuses, you elect people to do the homework for you.
Yeah.
Like you have neighborhood caucuses, and Democrats do the same. Every major party does a caucus. and you elect somebody in your neighborhood to represent you. And so they go out and they do the research, they take the time, they interview the candidates, and then they say, hey, this is the best one for all of us. And
Yeah,
you're,
and that's
you're,
how you get your electors, right? Like in each county from the caucus, they vote for the
yes,
elector.
yeah. And so, but primaries, especially here in Utah, they started doing signatures to get around the caucus. And now, because they know in caucuses are where they're most weak, primaries is where they're most strong, because they're like, hey, you know, I have a 90% chance of winning. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm going to go out and pay for signatures because I know I'm going to have a better chance of winning in a primary than I am a caucus.
Right.
Because the average person doesn't have the time to do the research, doesn't have the time to look people up. And all they see, all it comes down is donors. All it comes down is to having signs and ads. It does
Yeah.
not matter if you have parades or meet and greets or anything like that. People aren't going to come to them because they don't have the time. But they are going to be driving past that sign on the side of the road every day.
Yeah.
Over and over again. They are going to be like relaxing and seeing that 15-second ad multiple times.
Right.
But then that inherently has issues of itself, that you have people, these ads cost, these signs cost, and then you have super PACs paying 100K here, 50K here, $1 million here, and that person's going to be like, well, we got you elected, you owe us a favor or two.
Yeah. And any of those PACs are by default going to be a special interest group, because it's not like a few neighborhoods get together and make their own PACs. You know, it's always going to be somebody with an agenda 100% of the time. And that's one of the most frustrating things to me, because I wanted to get more involved in local politics and, you know, just be a part of it. But I just keep thinking, like, you don't win a race without somebody funding you. And it kind of forces you into a position where you have to be corrupt from day one, because you got to start promising people shit in order to get your funding before you even begin.
Oh yeah. Or you have to have a rich family, or you already have to have money.
Yeah.
Which limits the options of the everyday person running for office.
Yeah, it's probably why, you know, Huntsman, it's probably how he made it a few years back.
Yeah. That's exactly how they're wealthy.
Yeah.
And see, it really, in my opinion, the signature route really hurts the average person from running. I mean, they play it off, like media and stuff, they play it off as being great, you know, and convincing you that this is the best route. It gives everybody the option of doing it. But what they don't tell you is, yeah, everybody can run, but if you don't get this many signatures, you're not going to make it. If you don't get this much money for ads, you're not going to make it. If you don't get this many signs, you're not going to make it.
Well, and I don't know if it's the same way for state or even like county or local elections, but from what I understood, in national elections, in order to participate in debates, for example, you have to hit a certain threshold of donations. So if you're not getting that money at the very beginning, you're done for.
Yeah. The average Joe Smo can't win.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it does happen occasionally, like once in a blue moon, but it's not enough to make a difference.
Yeah.
But I've ran for anywhere from local, city, all the way up to state, and it's the same way all the way up. It's about the donations you get and who you know.
Yeah. Whose palms are you going to grease to get there?
Like, okay, this is not meant for me to sound salty at all. I mean, I'm okay with losing. I really am. Half the time I just do it to offer people a different option. That's all I do. And if I lose, I lose. So when I ran for school board, we had meet and greets almost every other week, and sometimes like twice a week. We were hitting them hard. And a couple of us were there all the time. And we talked a lot about the same stuff. And it's fine. I mean, it is what it is. We all have our own opinions. But the person who won, she showed up to one time, and that was at the very end. And she was a shill for the Education Union, UEA. And they put a bunch of money behind her and have her spend all this on signs and whatnot. And then the other person that took second, she spent tens of thousands of dollars on signs. Lost by like 1,000 votes. She wasn't too far behind, but she had to spend a lot of money to get there.
Right.
Those of us that barely spent anything, but did all the work, showed up to all the electors, and really met with people and hammered our stories, didn't get in.
Yeah.
And it's because, like, it all came down to money and who you knew.
Yeah.
So that's, again, people don't really understand that it's not for your average Joe until they've actually done it. And then their eyes are open to, oh yeah, I'm really starting to see how this works.
Yeah. And it seems like it'd be people that were already sort of on their way, because they, it's the old boys club where, the people who are going to make it are usually affiliated in some way with other people who already have. And so you just get more of the same.
Dude, it's true. And that's the incumbent part. You get the same people. That's why you see right now Congress is the oldest Congress we've ever had in history. In U.S. history,
the oldest president as well.
This is the oldest Congress and the oldest president. Okay, so you get people in there that are in there for 40 plus years, 30 plus years. There's people in Congress that have been in there longer than we've been alive.
Yeah, McConnell for one.
And they don't do it just from going out there and telling everybody how great they are and hammering down all their strategies and meeting with everybody and knocking on doors. Yeah. They do it from who you know and how many signs and ads can I get.
Yeah, from a top down sort of, as opposed to a grassroots.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, people like McConnell or Chuck Grassley, I think he's been in there for 100 years. I think there should be term limits. I don't know how you feel about that, but I think 20 years is more than enough time. Maybe even 15. If you can't get in there and get some stuff done in 15 or 20 years, then what are you even doing there? But for people who have been there for that long, for decades, like, chances are they've been corrupt for a long damn time, and they're just getting more and more and more used to it. And then they get to a point where they can do some of the most awful stuff and they don't bat an eye, because that's just another day for them, because they've been doing it for decades. And they become out of touch. They get this sort of like that elite mindset where it's like, I don't mind if these people suffer because they're a lesser class. And I think that happens so fast to them.
Yeah, that's true. And another, I do agree with term limits, but there's also another core issue that the average Joe doesn't know about. And this happens in our own state, even at the Board of Education and everything like that. You have unelected bureaucrats and staffers that are in there for longer than most of the people that are elected. Yeah. And it's those staffers who put the bills in front of you. It's those staffers that tell you how you should vote. Because let's face it, half these people that get in are like, well, I don't really know how to run a government. So you want to help me out? And this staffer's like, yeah, I've served for 20 years. Let me just throw some of these bills in front of you. Oh, don't mind the pork that I've added, to give my buddies an extra 100,000 here or there. Just mark yes. Yeah. And people will thank you later.
That makes me think of Dianne Feinstein.
Yes.
So out of it the last, year or so of her being there, that some people started suggesting that it might be elder abuse, because she didn't even know where she was. The staffers were in complete control.
Yep. That is 100% a prime example of staffers running the show.
Yeah.
And so I think when somebody gets elected, and this might be extreme, but when someone gets elected, I think the staff should be chosen by them. And when they lose the next race or the term limits are up, the staff should go with them.
I don't think that's too extreme at all.
That should be all new people every time. And then that way everyone can figure out what they're supposed to do together.
Yeah. Yeah. And it will decrease the corruption because, the longer they're there, the more corrupt they get.
Because as a country as a whole, we're hemorrhaging money.
Oh, my goodness. Yes.
We're hemorrhaging money. And that affects elections directly. If we can't even afford to have our own elections, like, I don't know how this country's going to last.
Yeah.
I really don't. Everything is getting so expensive that most people are going to be like, yeah, I can't afford to go up and vote, so I'm just going to send this mail-in ballot in, not knowing this mail-in ballot is half the time thrown away and discarded because they can't verify your signature.
Yeah. Well, and they don't necessarily let you know either. I found this out a couple years ago. You can get online and check, but you have to do it of your own accord. You have to want to go do it. They're not going to let you know.
That's the whole point, is you have to keep track of your own vote. Yet they don't tell you, like, oh yeah, your vote didn't count because your signature didn't match. I wish they would, at the very least, say, hey, give you a call, because half the time you're supposed to write your number on it anyway, if they have any questions. And why don't they give you a call and say, hey, your signature wasn't verified. Could you come in and do it again?
Yeah. And if you do find out on your own, if it's too late, you can't do anything about it anyway.
Right. Because not everyone's going to check it every night to make sure their vote got in.
Keep refreshing.
Yeah. And they don't tell you. So it's like, by the time you figure out that your vote didn't even count, the election's come and gone.
Yep.
Or like, I like the times where people voted and they're like, I didn't vote. They're like, why is my vote counted? I never voted.
Yeah.
Those are my favorite. The person's like, or like the ones that are like, my grandma somehow voted, but she's dead.
Right. See, and that's crazy to me how that can even happen, because, I was under the impression, like most people probably are, that there are checks in place. There are roadblocks that will keep these mistakes from happening, and come to find out that's just not really the truth, or at least it's not the way they say it is.
When I had a debate this last time I was running, I had a debate with the incumbent and somebody else that's running, and they were talking about voter integrity and signatures. And I said, well, I collect baseball cards and other things that are signed by players. Now, what you don't usually understand, and most people wouldn't know this, that your signature is never the same.
Right.
It depends on if you're in a rush, like doctors, for example. It's just a big, huge scribble because they're in a rush. They got to get the next person. And athletes are the same way. They're in a rush. They got like 100 things they got to sign. And it's not the same as if they were sitting down calmly doing one or two items. So, and then the next thing is, I pointed out, is you can't compare signatures that way. Then the second thing is, the people that are doing the signature verifications are not qualified to even compare signatures. They don't know handwriting. They aren't qualified in handwriting samples. They don't work for the FBI. They're just your average Joe expecting signatures to match when it doesn't.
Yeah, by default, it shouldn't, if you're always doing it freehand. And me, for example, I kind of scribble my signature, but even that being the case, it can differ dramatically.
Yeah, it also differs on like what you're writing on.
Right. What the pencil or pen you're using, it could be any number of things.
What if the ink is, fades out or something like that? And, what if I was in a rush and just had to quickly sign it or whatnot? and then that person's looking at it and comparing it to the one on my driver's license, and we all know the ones on our driver's license doesn't look anything like our normal signatures.
Yeah, because they're all digital,
Because
right?
you're trying to draw on this little pad that half the time doesn't even get your signature correct.
Yeah.
And you have a normal person like me or you looking at the signatures, trying to compare them, and they're like, they don't look the same, toss the vote. But then they don't tell you that your vote got tossed. You have to find that out.
Yeah.
But then also that brings me back to like people like Cox, where he has 25,000 signatures. The limit was 25,000 to get, or 20,000. And he won't come out and tell us what ones were verified. Because let's just say with Hatch, or not Hatch, Brent, it is Hatch, Orrin Hatch's son. Half of his didn't work. So if we go off that premise that half are thrown out, or even moderately 60% or 70%, let's give him the benefit of the doubt, Cox still wouldn't pass. He'd have to get, I think, 85% or higher.
Yeah, only 25,000, and the limit was 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, 80%.
Or 80%, yeah. So it's like, I don't really think that's the case, because a lot of votes do get thrown out.
Was that for him to run, or was that a ballot initiative? Or
yeah, it's a ballot initiative. Now that's another weird thing. You have to get signatures to bypass the caucus, and a lot of incumbents employ companies to go get the signatures for them. Where everyone's expecting signatures, they're like, oh yeah, our candidates are out there hitting the ground, they're going door to door knocking. I need your signature. Vote for me. I want to be in this race. That's not the case. They pay other people to do it. In Cox's case, he paid a company $125,000 for it. Now, this company has a history of voter fraud and signature forgery. They've had multiple employees get caught up in forging signatures.
Man, that should just discredit them right away. The one thing they're supposed to do, they did wrong.
Yep. And yet this company, and this is the weird part, this company has no direct contact info you can find online. In fact, it was KSL that brought this up. They could only find a LinkedIn page of the company. There's no website. There's no contact info, no way to email them, no way to call them. It's a company that you have to be an insider to know. You have to know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody that can put you in contact with this company to go collect your signatures.
That's shady as hell too.
Yeah. And people are like, oh, well, I can make up some excuse to defend that. I'm like, that's pay to play. That is the very definition of corruption.
Right. And if you're paying an outside corporation or company, whoever, to do it, they're not going to come back below the number you wanted. You're paying them for a certain number of signatures. They're going to find a way to get there.
Right. In fact, there's a lawsuit that one of the candidates brought up against this company because they didn't get her the required signatures.
Well, there you go. Jeez.
But so, and if you think about that, half the time those people aren't getting the correct signatures either. So there's a rumor out there that I've heard from other candidates that have been running for office, and I can't verify this. I wish we could, but the rumor is these companies can self-verify their own signatures without having a clerk do it. Now, it's been doing this since COVID. It was some kind of like rumor, something implemented where you didn't have to have in-person contact or anything like that, that companies could self-verify these signatures. Now, I've been trying to find any kind of documentation on this. So far, I've been unsuccessful, but a lot of the stuff that they keep in committees and stuff like that, you need grandma request. And a lot of the times they change the names or purposely misspell things so your grammar requests don't show up. Don't pull those. But anyway, the point I'm getting at is if you have companies that self-verify, that would make a lot of sense in Cox's case, because I doubt he even knows or if his signatures are true or not.
Yeah, he would just have to take their word for it. And I'm sure that
Yep.
they're not going to tell him that they're not legitimate. So he's
Yeah.
going to, you know, as far as he knows, they are. But self-verify shouldn't even be a thing.
As far as he knows, and let's face it, he's not going to second guess that. Neither is Deidre Henderson. They're going to verify the signatures themselves, which they could. They very well could. They're going to be like, well, you know, as long as I look the other way, then it should be okay. It should be okay. Like, we'll just say it was more than 80%.
Yeah, they'll have that plausible deniability as long as they don't press the issue and try to find out for themselves.
Because as it stands right now, Cox got 100%. We all know that's not true, but you can't prove it, because then you'd have to pull the records from the company, and the company isn't going to give you those records.
Yeah, especially if you can't even find them anyway.
Yep.
Yeah.
But what blows my mind also is, back to the media thing, is why aren't there reporters, journalists, real journalists in our state bringing this up and asking these hard questions? Why is it left to people like me and you to wonder these things about the device that can possibly change elections, voter registrations, and voter accountability and signature verification? Why does it have to be us that brings it up? And then they say, oh, that's just conspiracies. But okay, prove me wrong. Please prove me wrong.
Well, and you know, there may even have been some journalists who started looking into it, and as soon as they go to try to let the story out, somebody in a position of power is going to put the kibosh on it.
Right. And it's like,
you have to do it online.
Why wouldn't these journalists do this? This would be huge. What if you could blow the top off the lid off of a giant conspiracy to commit election fraud? You would go down in history as one of like a great journalist.
Yeah, there'd be definitely people across the world saying your name pretty quickly.
That's Watergate level.
Yeah, I was thinking that same thing. What was that guy's name? I can't remember, but yes, that's exactly who came to mind when you said that too.
Or the guy that did the brought down the prime minister of England in an interview. He asked some hard questions in it.
Of Nixon, I think.
Something versus Nixon. That was the Watergate. I can't remember the guy's name. Something versus Nixon. And then the British Prime Minister, I don't remember his name. I think maybe it was Boris Johnson. I don't remember. But one of them was brought down by a journalist that asked all of a sudden surprise questions that the guy had no answer for. And it just blew him out of the water. Yeah. And I don't know why journalists are so content of carrying the baggage of politicians, saying, well, you know, I want this guy to win, so I'm just going to carry his baggage, and he pays our company, so I'm just going to write nice things about him and write bad things about his competition. That's not journalism.
Right. That's and it's the access thing too. Like some politicians, if they're hit too hard with too many good questions, they could get a bad taste in their mouth about whatever network it was that sent that journalist, and suddenly that network doesn't have access to this politician anymore. Yep. So they're always kissing their ass because they want to be able to continue to talk to them.
That's exactly it. That's definitely another huge reason they don't want to kiss people's asses, and like why you see like, well, KSL's conservative. No, they're not. They're just kissing whoever's in charge their booty. And you see that besides the ass kissing, you see a lot of like studies that are shown that 90% of journalists, or maybe 80, it's a high amount, are left siding journalists.
Other journalists?
they're like left leaning, so liberal journalists, and they're going to go what the Democrats say most of the time, and that's okay. I mean, it's their prerogative, but I wish we had more real, honest journalists that would actually ask hard questions and put our leaders on check and on blast and say, "Hey, you're not being a real leader. You're corrupt. Explain, please, like Cox, please explain to me this COVID no bid contractor. Please explain to me why your signature verifications aren't released. You know, if you want my vote, just answer these basic questions. Like,
Yeah.
but the fact that he can't has me worried, and that's why
Suspicious.
I'm going to vote for the other guy, because at least the other guy is not hiding anything from me.
Yeah. And it's a shame too if you have journalists that really do want to dig up the truth about whatever politician it may be. If they're not with a major network, it delegitimizes them. Although that seems backwards to me, because the networks have already proven time and time again that they can't be trusted. They're just going to tell you two opposite ends of the same lie, essentially, and keep telling us to look one way so we don't look at what's really going on.
Yeah. And it's like, people don't have a lot of morals nowadays. They don't stand by their own convictions and they don't stand their ground. They just blow with the wind.
Yeah.
It's like, someone told me, what if you have a gun to your head and say, do you believe in God? Well, yeah, I believe in God, and I'm going to say I believe in God, and, go ahead. I believe in a higher power, but the average person wouldn't. Like, there's a scene in the movie Kingdom of Heaven, and it's about the Crusades. And the Muslims are attacking Jerusalem, and they're defending Jerusalem. And this is actually based on real events. But the main character turns to the priest, and the priest is like, we should just surrender, convert to Islam, and repent later. And that's how I see the average person in politics, in anything going on in their lives. If
Yeah.
we have all these corrupt people in power, they're just saying, oh, okay, let them get away with it this one time, or this next 20 times. We'll repent later. We'll just let it slide and deal with it later.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And I think, not only is that true with politicians and the media, they're going to say whatever they need to say to benefit them at the moment. But I think that kind of stance has sort of trickled its way down to a lot more of the average person. I mean, I saw a few weeks back, I think it was on Kimmel or something, they were interviewing people on the street, and they were like, how did you feel when Joe Biden did A, B, C, and D? And they're like, oh my goodness, he is awful. This is the worst thing ever, talking all this shit. And then they go, oh wait, that was actually Trump. And they're like, oh, well, I mean, he has his reasons. And I mean, that could go either way.
Yeah,
You
it
could have
can.
some Biden supporters, flip that on him, and it's going to be the same thing. And your morals shouldn't change based on who's in charge. And that's, again,
Exactly.
back to why I get so frustrated why these politicians get into power. And like, take John Fetterman, for instance. He ran as a liberal,
Yeah.
and now he's completely flipped the script.
Yep. And it's like, well, people are like, well, why do you vote for Trump? And I said, they're like, he's an adulterer and all that stuff. I'm like, yeah, he is. He's an adulterer. He does all this. He's not the greatest person in the world. He's a liar. He's a con man. I get that. But he's a giant middle finger to Washington, D.C., and that's why I vote for him. He's a giant middle finger to corruption. And I see it as, right now you have all these people in power. Doesn't matter what party they're in. It's a giant swamp of corrupt, inept people. We are not voting for the best and the brightest as leaders. Like, there's this woman here in Utah running for Senate for the Democrat Party, Caroline Gertch or something like that. If you've ever seen her Twitter, or X, it is this woman has no idea what she's doing. She talks constantly about herself and how will go up to like she's a mountain climber. And that's awesome. That really is. She's climbed Mount Everest and a bunch of other peaks. And I give her props for that. But she says, I want to change this in Congress. But then everyone's like, okay, how are you going to do that? Like, what's your platform? What are you doing? Nothing. Crickets. So then people are like, what are you running on? Like, and then she makes posts about how she'll be at the Nevada convention or other things. And there's people posting, you'll be a great senator of Colorado. And you're like, so wait, who's she running for again? And
Yeah.
so I tag the Utah Democrats in this and say, this is truly the best you guys had.
Yeah.
She won your caucus. This is truly the best and brightest that you put forth.
Right.
And that goes to Republicans too.
Yeah.
Are these truly the best people we're putting forth, like Trump and Biden? Are these really truly the people we want leading us?
Yeah, the 350 million people in the country, there's no way those are the two best candidates.
Yeah.
And I think I learned this when I was a teenager or something, way back when Bush got elected, that one of the big contributing factors to people voting for him is they'd say, well, he's the kind of guy I'd like to sit down and have a beer with. Like, you're not going to sit down and have a beer with the damn president. Like, the person that we vote for should be so much smarter than us. They should be so much have morals and be ethical. Like, we shouldn't vote for people who are all like us regular folk. We should try to find someone better.
Oh, I completely agree. And I think we should be electing the best and the brightest.
Yeah.
That run our government, because currently the people that are in charge can't. They certainly can't run it at all.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the two ideas don't really jive, like doing the right thing for the sake of the country, but also having to be that guy that everybody likes. It just doesn't go hand in hand. And it just seems like it's something that they're incapable of doing without trying to pull the wool over our eyes and misdirect us and gaslight us into thinking that they're the best person that we can get.
Oh, I completely agree. Okay, so according to Google, there is 333 million people in the United States. Congress is made up of 535 people. That means 0.00016
Jeez.
represents the population of 333 million. So if you think about that, out of all those people, how many are best and brightest?
Oh, geez.
And you're like sitting here going,
zero, right? I mean, just the number, looking at those two numbers, it's got to be zero.
Of course, it's got to be zero. And so it's like, okay, well, thank you for running this country into the ground and giving us trillions of dollars in debt that we're never going to pay back.
Yeah. Well, it's just shooting ourselves in the foot more and more, because at the beginning we were talking about just how broke the country is. But I mean, regardless of what anybody's opinion is on what's going on in Ukraine or in Israel, it's really frustrating that it, will take $5 to $10 billion or whatever to give everybody free health care. We don't have that. We can't solve the homeless crisis. We can't feed hungry kids, but we got 16 billion going to Israel. And then a few weeks later, some massive amount. So they can always afford wars. They can always afford conflict. But when it comes to actually helping people, we just don't have the money.
Yeah, and that has to do with like country aid to other countries and stuff like that. And honestly, I'm against giving aid to other countries. I'm against giving weapons to other countries simply because, like, even our allies, I've never received a check from Israel or Britain or
Yeah.
any of these other countries. Canada, I've never gone to, but we give them millions.
Well, and Israel has free healthcare and free college. If they have that, why are we giving them money?
Exactly. And so we give them all this money and expect nothing in return. And that money gets funneled back to the politicians.
Mm-hmm.
And it's there's corruption again.
Yeah.
But like, I'm against all that because you can't hold that money accountable. And it should be going to our citizens first.
Agreed.
It should be going to fix our roads. It should be going to fix our power grid that's 70 years old.
Mm-hmm. And we've had a few bridge collapses in the last couple of years, and they've been talking about infrastructure for 20 years, or as long as I can remember. We need to fix our infrastructure, and we're getting started on it now, but it's like a little late.
Our country and our states are stuck in this imperialistic idea. Like we're still a republic, but they got it in their head that they gotta have imperialistic ideas where we gotta police the world, we gotta police, we gotta control everything, and that's just not the case. Like for example, because we're in Utah, we'll reference this Utah situation for those other people that are out there. Sorry, but so we recently had a whole bunch of illegal immigrants be dropped off. They went, according to the government, the federal government, they went to Colorado first on a plane, and then they were taken by Colorado, Denver to Salt Lake, and by plane, and dropped off there with a handwritten note saying, "Find somebody in a uniform." And these people show up, and you're like, "Oh crap! What do you got? How are we going to place these people?" And instead of turning them into ICE and the proper authorities, because we're a sanctuary state, but not really a sanctuary state, our governor won't tell us. But according to ICE, we're a sanctuary state. They put all those people up and helped them out, gave them shelter and everything like that, stuck them with a group, an unknown group. And they, according to our police chief that helped them, they disappeared into our state. They know where they are, but we don't.
Yeah.
But yet we have thousands upon thousands of people that are homeless.
Right.
That are citizens. And why can't we take care of our citizens first? Like, I'm all for people immigrating. I love that they can come to a country and start a new life and flee from whatever shithole they came from. Okay? That's great. I would do the same thing.
Yeah.
But we're currently now in a system where these people aren't here to assimilate and join us and be Americans. They want to turn our country into the crap hole they fled. And it's like, that I'm against. They already broke the law coming into our country.
Right.
Not the proper way. And I get, we can talk about how the way to get into our country needs to be fixed and it's backlogged and all that. And that is the federal government's fault. Because every single president in Congress keeps kicking that can down the road.
Yeah.
But it's like something needs to be done, or else this is what's one of the factors that's going to make or break our country.
Yeah.
We can't have all these people come into our country and keep it alive. Like, you just can't take care of this many people.
Especially if we're sending all the money overseas.
Yeah. Like,
and that's that I'm with you on all that. Like, I'm all for legal immigration, but man, we got people here that are hurting, and we can't afford to take care of the people here because we're doing these other things. Like you said, that imperial mindset, like policing the whole world. Like they try to get us to believe, because they want to push us through fear, whichever direction they want us to go. They use fear to push us in that direction and say, well, if we're not out there policing the world, they're going to come here. And make you say, well, what did we do to piss them off so much?
Yeah.
Why are they coming here? It's not because they hate our freedom, like that old trope. That just makes no sense. Back in the day, I was like, oh, they hate our freedom and they hate us. But really, if they're being left alone, we're not even going to cross their mind.
Actually, Ukraine would be a prime example in this. Where did that 100 billion go? Because Ukraine basically has said most of it's gone and was lost. But why couldn't we have used that money to help with immigrants coming here?
Exactly.
To hire more people to process them faster and everything like that, and help them down the road to becoming legal citizens.
Yeah, they could have built a whole infrastructure at the border.
Yeah, 100 billion. That would have paid for the wall like 14 times.
Yeah, they could have housing, they could have shelters, hospitals. They could set up a thing where they could stay there for a period of time while they're vetted, while they do their citizenship stuff, and they'd be fine, they'd be safe, they'd be taken care of. But we can't do that because we got to fund wars all over the world.
There's whole towns that are for sale that you can buy for like $20 million, and it has tons of houses and whatnot. And I mean, some of these are run down or they have something wrong with them, and that's okay. We could put $1 billion into it, and there's whole towns. We can have immigrants living in while they learn English, while they learn the customs, and they could have the dignity of having jobs. They could have the dignity of having education to learn, and we don't have to de-dignify them and put them in sex slave trade and have cartels make them law. Like, I cannot believe that we have over 200,000 children come across that border and get lost in America a year.
Yeah, that's crazy.
To cartels and whatnot on this side of the border. The fact that our congressmen talk about that but don't do anything about that blows my mind. That Utah is one of the hot spots. It has an international hub.
Yeah.
And these children come through our area and then disappear. And it's like, why don't our leaders care?
Yeah. And that makes me think of Lahaina a couple of years ago when the fire happened. Something like 2,000 kids went missing, never to be recovered.
Yep.
Like some massive amount of kids. I think it's something like 1,200 from one of the school districts alone. Like, how does that happen? That's just crazy to me.
And they just vanish, and they don't find bodies. They don't find anything.
No bodies.
It's like,
no remains, nothing.
Really? Where do all these people go?
Yeah, exactly. I have no idea.
Like, I found out in the past year or so that there's a huge thing with our Native American population that they disappear.
Yeah, at a
huge rate, higher than the average person. Like,
yeah.
Any kind of race, they're significantly higher because of the reservations they live on. Because most people don't realize that reservations, the Indian nations, are called dependent nations. They have their own laws, basically they have everything unto their own nation. They can even have their own money.
Yeah, it's all their jurisdiction.
Yeah.
They're crazy underfunded. They're not going to be able to have a manhunt every time somebody goes missing.
Right. And what they pointed out was in this documentary that I can go over there and do something terrible to someone, kill them, rape them, whatever. I can do something terrible and then go cross back out of the res, and nothing will ever come of it because the reservation and the federal government and the state government don't talk to each other.
Right.
And it's like, how do you have three entities that don't communicate?
Yeah.
Especially when somebody goes missing or is murdered or
Yeah. Kidnapped,
yeah,
rape, whatever it may be. And that's another place we could be putting some of this money to help make people's lives better. I mean, we kind of threw them all into a few different spots in the middle of nowhere and said, all right, figure it out. Well, there's no jobs there. There's no resources. I mean, I know that in New Mexico, my dad used to live there, and he'd go out on the res to do some work. And he's like, a lot of these people don't even have bathrooms. They have to go outside to use the bathrooms.
yeah.
And it's like, that's where a lot of our money should be going. At the very least, they should have the same amenities we have, the same privileges we have in life. But of course, we can't afford it.
And that would require them integrating and losing their nation status. And they have to take some accountability for the state of their nation. However, that being said, like when I was running for office, I found out that like the Navajo Nation here in Utah, they don't even get a voting district. They have to like leave leave their reservation and go vote at a different county.
Oh, wow.
Because they're count as a different citizen. It's some complex thing that I don't know how it works. I don't know the legalities behind it, but they're a U.S. citizen, but they're not.
That's so weird.
And
I didn't know about that.
they can't vote for federal elections or state elections inside the res because it's a different nation.
But even if they tried to come out, I mean, would they be in a position where they could even register to vote and actually cast a vote?
I don't know how that works. Again, I wish I did. I'd have to do more research on that. But the fact that they can't vote on the res blows my mind. Like, because it counts as a different nation. Just like my friend was telling me that he's U.S. Samoan, he's stuck in a limbo. He even served our country. He's stuck in a limbo that he's not a full citizen. Did you know we don't have full citizens? Where if you're from a territory like U.S. Samoa or Puerto Rico, that you don't vote in elections, you're not counted as a full U.S. citizen.
Jeez. Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Just like, here's another one, Washington, D.C. You don't vote in federal elections the same way you and I would because they don't have representation. They
Right.
don't have a senator and a representative.
Which I think is crazy. I think they definitely should. I mean, I think Puerto Rico should be able to vote, Guam. I mean, if it's a place we went and took, like, they should be able to vote. If we're going to call it part of our country.
I understand Washington, D.C., and I understand how it's set up to be that no state would have more power than any others having the seat of the federal government. But at the same time, it should be limited to basically business and government only. People shouldn't be living there.
Yeah.
So to speak. Like, you can rent an apartment if you're working in Washington, D.C., but like, I don't think people should be living there permanently where they aren't allowed to vote and stuff like that because it doesn't apply to them as it would to you and I in a state. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I follow you.
It's a hard concept to think about, but then all of a sudden once it clicks, it's like, wait, really? Like, we have half citizens or not full citizens? Weird.
Yeah, I didn't know that about the territories. I mean, I figured they couldn't vote, but I didn't think they were any less citizens.
Yeah, he had to come here. Once he moved to Utah, he had to get his full citizenship, and that took 9 years.
Oh my Lord.
And like I said, he even served our country. And it's like, why was he not, first of all, he served our country. Why was he not given an automatic citizenship?
Agreed.
Second of all, why did it take 9 years for a half citizen that's a territory to become a full citizen?
Yeah.
We're not talking about your average person from, like, say, a completely different country. This is a U.S. territory. He's still a sort of a citizen. He's still a citizen.
Well, and like you said, I think anybody who, if you're going to join the military, citizenship should be an automatic thing.
Yes.
And that could be a path to
totally agree.
citizenship for a lot of people coming here now. They could, if they're fleeing some war-torn country and come over and say, look, I want a fast track to citizenship, put me in the Marines for 4 years.
And
And
I think it should also include their families. Like, if a guy comes over and says, hey, most of the time, like National Guard and stuff, if you're not active duty, it's like 8 years. I think what Army's 4 something, I think Air Force is 6. Anyway, the point is, he has to serve those 4 full years. If he goes and leaves early or gets discharged dishonorably or, breaks his side of the deal, then I think he should get deported and lose that opportunity to get citizenship. But I also think it should also apply to his family. Like, he says, hey, I have a wife and 2 children. If I join the military, do they get citizenship too? Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
You get everything a veteran should get.
Not to mention they need to get a hell of a lot more. That's a whole other topic.
Yeah, that's a whole other topic. But like, they should get everything a veteran's entitled to: benefits, education. I don't care where they come from, as long as they're willing to sacrifice and give up their lives potentially for our nation, and say, hey, I'm willing to move here and even give up my life. Then yeah, they should get automatic citizenship.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I think there are some countries, like I'm pretty sure South Korea, it's mandatory.
Yes.
But I've heard that even if you live here, you have to return to go serve, yes, and then you can come back.
It is mandatory. It's actually quite a few countries. Israel does it. Korea does it. And it's a mandatory, depending on which country you go to, 2 to 4 years in either a military capacity or a government, like Homeland Security or police aspect.
Yeah.
And it's to not only give the person a sense of nationalism that they're helping their country, but it gives them unique skills.
Discipline.
And discipline in your daily life, knowing how to do a budget and whatnot, and everyday skills that you could apply.
Yeah. Plus and the perspective you gain as well is just, you would just learn so much simply from going through the motions. Even if you never saw action, you would just grow so much as a person that you'd just, be a better citizen overall, just being a better person overall.
Yeah, and I think they should do that, and not to mention they would teach you how to defend your family in a jiffy if something happened. I'm not saying there will be everything that happens, but it would be nice to have everyone have those skills in case of conflict.
Yeah.
That way,
I'm not so sure. Go ahead.
That way, we don't have like one person out of a whole community of 3,000 people that know what they're doing, or how to handle a gun, or how to build basic defenses.
Right. I'm not sure how I would feel about having it be mandatory here, but I think for those that do join, the quote unquote reward should be far more substantial. I think if you go serve in the military for 25 years, you should be set for life. You should have free health care. You should, have your pension.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be left,
I think
all alone.
I think it should be mandatory for all of us, women included, to serve 2 years minimum. And you just, like I said, you learn skills and whatnot. But you hear all about all these people that say, we want free education, free all that stuff. Well, I think as for giving you the free education, like college education, 4 years, that you should pay it back by doing 2 years.
That makes a lot of sense. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be something.
It doesn't have to be military. It could be like Homeland Security, or it could be FBI. or it could be, just even a state trooper or something like that.
Yeah.
And, or even a teacher.
Yeah.
Like they could teach you all the skills you need to do whatever, or firefighters.
Yep.
Like they have the military engineers and stuff like that do the wildfire fighting.
Right. Yeah,
And
I think that would be a damn good idea, because that's one way you could earn your free education. And you'd get, a lot more than just the book learning, like we were saying. It's growing in every conceivable way as a person.
you get applicable skills, and not to mention, people need to be accountable for their skills that they learn. And so when you get free education, and you have all these people doing like gender studies and whatnot, they don't appreciate the education they got. They don't appreciate, like, if they got a free education just because, it would turn into, a good example is Greece. When Greece, a couple years back, its government collapsed because it went bankrupt.
Yeah.
And the EU had to bail them out. Same with America. We had to bail them out. It's because a huge problem was their youth had a 60% unemployment rate.
Damn.
Because they had free education and they got so much money from the government every month. Like it was like $500 from the government as a universal income, that they didn't care. They just partied the entire time and just went to college to party. They didn't have to learn anything.
That does make a lot of sense, though, because I heard not too long ago, like, psychologists did studies and found out that it's 100% true that if you get something for free, you don't value it as much. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's free, you don't care.
And it's like in Greece, they had also stated that most of the degrees that the people were getting, this would be like 8-year-long degrees for a 2-year degree that you would normally get. They would spend 8 to 10 years getting it.
Just because they could.
And because it was paid for. And they
Yeah.
got paid to do it. And most of them were useless degrees like art or something like that. I'm not saying that that's a bad degree. Like I do history, and I minored in art history and photography, and it's like, that's okay. I'm not doing that like per se. Like I'm not saying that's bad, but the point being is, when you have suddenly 100,000 people getting art degrees,
Yeah.
that degree suddenly becomes useless.
Yep.
And everyone has an art degree all of a sudden. It's like everyone's all of a sudden a DJ type thing.
Yeah.
You have 200,000 DJs, and it's like that suddenly that degree becomes useless. And that's all they were doing, is just sitting on the beaches, and their economy collapsed.
Yeah.
Because none of their youth were working. None of them had skills. And we see the same thing with our nation. Our youth have no tangible skills. They go to like, okay, high school, for example. This will shock you, okay? Here in Utah, if you go onto the USBE, Utah State Board of Education website, they have an area you can click. It's like you scroll down just a little bit, and it says data portal. If you go in there, it tells you that they have an 88% graduation rate. That's not bad. 88% graduate. Okay. But then you scroll down just a tiny bit, like not even like a full click, and it says an area that says proficiency rates. You're like, okay, I'll click that. And suddenly it pops up and says, math, like, here, I'll actually tell you the exact amounts, but it's absurd.
They're just not proficient in anything yet. They graduated.
No. It's like, and it goes off of their proficiency and grade level, as in like, what at your grade. So like, if you're reading, it should be, this is where you should be at on your grade level. Okay. All right. Student proficiency. I'm just pulling it up right now. It's loading. Okay. So across all students, there's 3 categories. Language arts, which is like English, reading, and all that, 44% are proficient.
Which would mean at the level they should be, right?
Yep. Mathematics, 40%.
Jeez.
Science, 45%.
So how are they even graduating then? By that metric, you would imagine
There
that
you
they would be
go.
graduating.
You thought the same thing I did. And whenever I've asked this, how are they graduating if these are so low? Is our standard of graduation really that low to match?
Must be.
Because by these statistics, that should be that way. And mind you, they got flack from this, and so they changed it that says the test type is the RISE, the UA plus, the DLM now. They had to specify where the data come from. And while you could say, oh, no one really cares about RISE, no one really cares about these tests, okay. But here's the thing. Each county and each school has a grade that if they get, like, say, for example, my daughter's school got an F, the state has to step in, give them more money, and take over the school to bring up the proficiency rates. Okay? So the grades that they give these counties and buildings and schools and whatnot are based off of this data. So if their students can't get over 44%, they get a failing grade.
Gotcha. So there's their incentive. There's the motivation to fudge the numbers and let it slide. Because I think I heard that even if they don't fail, and this may be something, because I heard this a long time ago, it may not still be true, but the better the schools do, the more funding they get, and vice versa. So if you have a school that's doing poorly, they get even less money, which is not at all going to help them solve the problem, because I know Utah has one of the lowest per student investment rate in the country. I know like 3 years ago it was the worst.
So I looked it up, and that is the statewide average I gave you. So I looked it up, and I have kids that go to a bunch of different schools. One of my daughters, her school shows it as language arts 28%, mathematics 29%, science 34%. So her school's failing. And they base it off of that state percentage. So I always say, if it's good enough for the state, it's good enough for the district, and it's good enough for the schools, then why wouldn't we base it off that data? And why are people graduating at 88%?
Right.
Does that make sense? Like,
no, yeah.
And so there's no will really that can defend it. And so whenever I ask people about it, like people in charge, I've asked board members, I get filled with either a bunch of bullcrap or no answers at all.
I bet a lot of them don't even know.
So this one board member I got into it with, she said, well, the 11th graders don't take these tests, so they bring down the percentages. Okay. Let's go off hers for a second. All right. So I go through the numbers, and you can take out 11th grade. I take out 11th grade, and it is, let's see, apply. Language arts would be 44.5%, math 40%, science 45%. So it went up by like what, 2 percentage points?
Yeah.
That doesn't help at all. I'm like, please explain to me the other 3 through 10.
Right.
And they actually, since I've brought this up, they have updated their system. They removed 12th grade, and 11th grade doesn't even have a grade anymore. So they at least tried to make up for it, fudge the numbers a little bit more, but it still doesn't. It still doesn't look good at all.
Well,
It still doesn't come back to the 88. Like, how do you have
right.
88?
Yeah, which would be what happened if she was right about her information.
It's like if half the kids can't read, write, or do science or do math, like, how are you graduating them?
Right.
It explains why that when you see kids like working at Dollar Tree or something and you give them so much money, they look at you and you're like, yeah, you owe me this much change. They don't even know how to count the change.
Mm-hmm.
That's not their fault. That's a fault of our school system completely failing them.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is if they were held to a higher standard, they would probably achieve it.
Oh, yeah.
They don't need to achieve it because they're not being held to that standard. So they're just doing them a disservice, just trying to set them up to expect life to be much easier than it's going to be, especially considering their education isn't there to back them up.
And people rag on me and say, like, you're against teachers and you're against, students and stuff like that. I'm like, no, I'm not. I just think we need to hold everybody, parents included, to a higher standard so we get better results.
Yep.
If I hire someone that doesn't know how to read, write, or even speak proper English, then what can I expect out of them other than just sitting there playing with their thumbs?
Yeah.
And playing with their dick, like, and so we need to have standards.
Yeah.
And they teachers union and stuff like that, they constantly defend their statistics, and I get that because their teachers are promoting their career first. It's not about the students, it's about the teacher's career. And they're not, the union is not for a union, it's for the teachers, not for the students.
Yeah.
And we here in Utah, we spend $9 billion on education. It is the highest budget item in our state. $9 billion a year. And we don't even have kids. Half the kids can't even grade level read, write, or do any arithmetic.
Yeah, and that's just a recipe for disaster because then you're putting all these people who have a stunted education into the workforce, less production, less new ideas coming out, and it's just going to be, sort of a snowball effect.
Yep. And they wonder why they're getting replaced by kiosks and AI.
Mm-hmm.
AI is not that smart, and it hallucinates.
Yeah.
Like I saw them here in Utah. One of the schools is running a trial run to implement AI in the school. That's cool, but when I asked, I said, "How did you guys solve the AI hallucinating and giving false giving false info?" Because that's what they do. And they're like, "Huh?"
Right. They didn't even know it was something to happen, right?
And for those of you who don't know that AI hallucinates, when you can have a conversation with the AI like about Hitler and World War II, and sometimes the AI, we don't know why, it will think of a history that's never happened, like the Nazis won, for example, and it will defend itself and tell you how the Nazis won and completely change history. And it'll hallucinate that history that doesn't exist until you reset it, reinstall it.
Oh, wow.
Because AI's it's programmed to learn by you constantly talking to it, and it often it's set of a programming that the more people talk to it, the more it learns.
Right.
But if it's stuck in this hallucination, then it's not learning anything, and it's telling you about this alternate history that doesn't exist. It does it with images too. Like it'll hallucinate images, and you can ask all these different questions, and they'll hallucinate. And some are better at not hallucinating than others, but they still give false info. So when I asked the school about it, they just, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, well, who's running your AI program? AI is not bad. It's just it needs to be worked on.
Well, people don't know its limitations either. I think there's a lot of people that don't really understand, like take a chat GPT, for example. It's just a language learning model. It doesn't actually know anything. It's just regurgitating the information that was put into it. But that's crazy that you said like it'll defend its own position even when it's wrong. I hadn't heard that before. That's kind of
yeah, politicians and stuff like that. Like I was watching a different podcast. I was watching, what is it called? Timcast IRL, and the chat GPT had made up something about him. So when he asked him about him, it called him like this revolutionary, and that he had been like a terrorist and did all this stuff. And he's like, no. And it even gave him links to articles, but when you click the links, they didn't work. And he straight up told them that's wrong. The article doesn't say that, what you're saying. And it had a full-blown hallucination.
Wow.
And he did it live in front of, potentially hundreds of thousands of people that watched it talk this trash about him. And he's like, I never did any of that. It even said like he had a felony or went to court for something. And he's like, okay, provide the references. And it couldn't.
Just gave him bunch of links.
And then finally, when you prove it wrong, it'll just say, I'm sorry. That's my mistake. I'm still learning.
Right.
Or I've seen Microsoft one, it's Copilot. I've seen it actually in chats with people when they prove it wrong. It was like a math problem. And he had a whole conversation with about a math problem. And he proved that it was wrong about this math problem. And it said, I'm sorry, we cannot continue this chat. And it closed it.
The AI rage quit?
Yeah, the AI rage quit. It was so hilarious. It was all over Reddit for a little bit.
Jeez, have you heard about that? Well, you probably already know this, but a lot of them, the ones that are emerging, that are a little bit more capable, they lie a lot and on purpose. And I've heard that they had one of their models was trying to get into something, and I can't remember what it was, but it had those, not the CAPTCHAs, but the like, hey, click here, show me all the ones that have cars in it or whatever. Well, the AI got onto TaskRabbit and hired somebody to do that for it. And the person said, well, why can't you do this yourself? And it said, oh, I'm vision impaired. And when they went back and they looked at the data, because they can kind of see in real time, like its process, it basically said to itself, I can't tell it the truth. I have to lie. And it came up with a perfectly good lie and was able to circumvent these systems by manipulating a human into helping it. Yeah, and it's a million times smarter. Oh my goodness, it'll just play us like.
If you think about it in an education aspect, if we use AI and it tells us, like, for example, Google had to redo their AI Gemini because it was, whenever you were to look up Nazis, it was producing images of black people in Nazi outfits. So, yeah, totally wrong races of people.
And like English royalty, they were all coming back black too.
Yeah, and so, and you find out that the person in charge of it was against DEI and all, or they were for DEI and everything and diversity, and just wanted the AI to have a diverse view. Well, that kind of changes history. But if you're using that in a class, what if the student believes that? The whole class believes it, that all the Nazis were black.
Well, and how long before nobody really knows for sure, because they've been listening to all this information that's coming from it, and pretty soon nobody knows what's real.
Yeah. And if we're constantly being fed lies, how do we know what's real or not? It's not. And that goes back to like political corruption and stuff. How do we know our votes count? How do we know of all this? Because if we cannot verify it with AI, with education, and we're not allowed to speak up and investigate it, like, criticize it, just ask simple questions. If we're not allowed to do that, how do we know everything around us is even legit?
Yeah, there'd be no way. You just have to take the word of somebody.
Yeah, it's like I said with that at the beginning, where that one person in the town counts all the votes, goes into a back room by himself, and comes out and tells everybody, "This is who won all the votes, but I burned all the votes, so there's
Yeah.
no way we'll be able to tell. But just trust me, this person won."
Yeah. And now imagine that on a large scale and
Yeah,
everybody relying on that for their information.
imagine that in education, imagine that in voting, imagine that in just our daily government,
Yep.
even in business. Just because your boss says so, like, is this cheeseburger really $10, or is it just because you thought it should be $10 overnight?
Yeah.
Does this hamburger really cost $10 to ship? Really?
Yeah. Take my word for it.
Take your word for it. But I won't allow you to look at the shipping logs.
Right.
And it's like, we can't base our whole society off of taking other people's words for it, the leaders in charge of us. That's Orwellian. That's 1984.
Yeah.
At
Everything
that
based on
point,
assumptions.
it's a cult. It's a cult of the government.
Right.
They'll have the thought police. Like when our own government, like last year or the year before, tried to create the Department of Health or Department of Disinformation. Yes, that's what it was. The Department of Disinformation at the Homeland Security.
So, like a legit propaganda arm.
Yeah. And that they would tell you what to think. And if you had any opposing view, then they could hold you and charge you with all these different laws.
Oh my Lord.
It lasted 2 weeks before there was too much public outrage on it, because people are like, we're not having the thought police.
Well, and who knows, with the government, they may have just went hush hush with it and continued working on it.
Okay, yeah. Disinformation Governance Board. It would be an advisory board in the Department of Homeland Security. And it's like, who are these people on this board? How do they know what's real and what's not? I mean, look how much changed in COVID.
Mm-hmm.
They told us masks worked. Now we know they didn't.
Yep.
They told us these vaccines would be effective and that you wouldn't be able to get COVID if you had one. That was proven a lie. We were told that, if you got a booster shot, it would be okay. That was a lie. And we now know that Moderna and a bunch of others faked, Pfizer especially, faked their trials numbers. Nothing happened to them.
Not one bit shocked.
But okay, so I'm not going to go down that conspiracy road, but my point being is with this, if those people lied to us about information, the people on this advisory board would base their information of what's real and what's disinformation off of the lie that was told.
Yeah, absolutely. Like,
and then
look at the CDC, how many things they were wrong about during COVID, and it may or may not have been nefarious. Maybe it's just an honest mistake. But if this board is using that information to say this is an absolute fact, then it's all wrong.
The Salt Lake City Tribune put out an article during COVID that people that weren't vaxxed should be locked up by the National Guard and put away in an internment camp.
Who said that?
The Salt Lake City Tribune.
Oh my Lord.
And that fear that they had that the lie they propagated and literally was propaganda was based off of false information. And that's a huge rabbit hole. But you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
when you have people that won't allow you to check and triple check things, then that gets me very suspicious.
Well, and that's like with the scientific theory. That's why peer review is so damn important.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, somebody could just say, this is what it is, and you just have to take their word for it. That's not how science works. That's not how, a lot of these things we've discussed should work. It should be a much more transparent thing.
And they say, trust the science. Okay, I do trust the science. Prove it.
Right.
Triple check it. Check your theory. Have peer review it. And don't run into it with just saying, trust me or else.
Well, and if you don't know, they should say, we don't fucking know. Because I think that's what the CDC
yes.
huge mistake with is they're like, we're not sure, but let's say what we think it is. And then they turn out to be wrong. And everybody's like, well, these guys don't know what the hell they're talking about anyway.
I wish, even our local leaders, I wish leaders on every aspect, all the way from local to federal, would learn how to say, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to be a leader and say, I don't know.
At least it's honest.
Yeah, and they can always say, look, I don't know, but you know what? I'll find out. And that's what I used to say in my campaigns. I may not know something. I'm not afraid to say it, but I can go find someone who does know, or I can go find out myself. And that's okay to say. I wish more people would say that, because not all of us are going to know everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I wish our leaders would not get this corrupt God complex that they do know what's best for everybody. And they fill their circles with people that are just as retarded as them.
It's more yes, man.
Yeah. They're not smart. What I mean by retard, I mean they're not like der, because I'm okay with a der person. I'd actually prefer them over these people. These people purposely propagandize you, gaslight you, and tell you that they're right, you're wrong, you don't know what you're talking about. End of conversation. Don't triple check your work. Don't double check my work. End of conversation. I'm right. And if you don't believe me, you're going to go to jail.
Well, and back to the I don't know aspect, you'll have some people that don't know, then they guess, they find out they're wrong, but they don't want to lose face. So they'll just keep doubling down and doubling down and doubling down. Whereas they could have just said, I don't know. Like you said, let me find out. And then they're not stuck in a position where they have to keep lying to keep their own image up.
And I use dur not to make fun of them, but I prefer that person, because at least someone that's intelligently not all there would at least be honest with me and tell me. I like those people. They are honest. They do tell me. And we can't learn if people don't tell us.
Yeah.
And our leaders refuse to be told anything.
Yeah.
They refuse to be questioned. They refuse to be told anything, that they know all. Like, okay, so I had a farm going for, I took, when I lost my jobs, when COVID hit, I went and got the unemployment that they were promising. I took advantage of the situation, and if it's there, I'm going to take it.
Yeah.
I took that money and invested it all into plants, seeds, equipment, everything like that to start a farm. And since we were all locked down, I spent the time reading with my wife, and this is how this plant grows. This is how you can build this, this, and this. So the drought hit a couple of years later, and they said, you can't use your normal water. Well, I don't have culinary water. I don't have Weber water. So what water am I going to get? And the state gave cities priority over the water. Well, I have to get my water off of irrigations that trickle down from different wells. It goes right through the city property. They used it for their golf course.
Oh,
So here I am watching the city with their water just on their golf course, and my plants just died. I have two. One small apple tree that barely is alive. It'll never recover. It's at this point it's a bunch of succulents, and a raspberry plant. Oh, and a lemon plant. But the lemon plant he survived because I actually took him inside because he wouldn't survive the winter. But
that's kind of funny because I had a lemon tree and an apple tree, and the apple tree died a couple years ago when we weren't getting any water. And I did the same thing with the lemon tree. I brought it inside and then I froze it to death, I think, because it was way too cold because it's like a tropical plant. But yeah, I mean, I hadn't seen a tree like just die
yeah,
in who
so
knows how long.
I had over 1,000 plants. They're just all died.
Oh,
Now,
man.
what part angered me the most is the state gave the city this authority to do that. I have water rights too, but
Yeah.
I'm just dependent on the person above me to take their share all the way down the line. All right, but the part that angered me most is Governor Cox is a farmer. Okay, his farm is alfalfa. Alfalfa takes up 60%, or it's like 66%. It's a significant amount of the agricultural water in the state. So, and then they sell the alfalfa for exorbitant amounts to China. Because China will buy alfalfa bales at something like $20 to $40 a bale. So not only did Cox make money off of the drought, all the other farmers got to suffer that weren't doing alfalfa.
Right. Well, and I still hate that whole the golf course idea, man. Like anytime I just see, I mean, sure, golf is great. I'm not a golfer per se, but if we're in a drought, it's like, sorry, golf course owners, you're screwed for a little while. Maybe you should put turf down or something.
And my opponent, the incumbent, he said he laughed at me and said, the state doesn't give them that authority. I'm sorry the city did that to you. And I'm like, but the golf course is run by my city. And you gave the city, the entity itself, the power to do that because you allowed them to get water for their own utilities, like parks, for example. Well, the unintended consequence is that golf course is city owned and it acts as a park. It's a utility
Oh,
for the city. And I happen to be downline of it. Because most of the time they take the water out of the trenches and the wells there, and they use it in their own ponds, and I get the runoff from their ponds. Okay. So they didn't have that much water, and so I wasn't getting any. My whole entire area dried up in August of that year. Because like July, I had water. Then all of a sudden they're like, we're out of water. And I'm like, what? What about all the wells? You literally have an aquifer like 2 blocks away that's city owned. And you're telling me you can't pump some water out of it to send down the line? I begged them to send me water down the line.
And nothing, huh?
Nothing. But now they just actually put in a city public works building across my street that's a little further down the line than me. So whenever they need water, they have to run the water down there.
Yeah. And I just can't wrap my head around that. Like, we need this water so people can walk on the grass as opposed to something that actually feeds people. It's just priorities are all jacked up. And you mentioned aquifers. I don't know how true this is, but I had heard somewhere that there is entire oceans worth of water underneath the ground. And if we could tap into it, we wouldn't have the problem because it's all fresh water. But I mean, I guess that's kind of a conspiracy theory because we don't want to tell you because it's easier to control you when we have the water. I don't know if that's true, but if we have a lot of water under there, we need to be busting into that so we don't have this problem
It
anymore.
would be certainly something worth talking about in the future about conspiracies and definitely doing some research over. But we've almost hit our time.
Nice.
So we got to start wrapping it up.
You got it.
Well, either way, I want to appreciate you doing this, and I appreciate anybody that watches this, because conversations like this are important for people to hear and watch. And I want everyone to ask questions. Ask questions of me, ask questions of you. Yep. Don't take everything we say with a grain of salt. Do the research. I've given you the ideas, do the research.
Well, little disclaimer, I'm an expert on absolutely nothing. And so anything I may have said, there's always that possibility that I'm way off base.
I don't claim to be an expert on anything either. I just follow where the road leads me.
Yep.
If that's a rabbit hole I'm going down tonight, then I'm going to go down that rabbit hole. I'm going to look at everyone's disclosures and financials, because I'm autistic. So it's something I do. I spend my time going down rabbit holes, looking up people, looking up subjects, whatnot. But I'm a master of none.
Yeah.
Well, everyone, thank you for spending the 2 hours of watching this with us. We will be doing more of these in the future.
Absolutely.
So, Coop, where can people find you?
Well, I don't know yet. I'll have to get back to you on that one. All I have as far as socials is my business stuff. So I'll have to get some stuff set up and
yeah, certainly do that
next time.
We'll start building a following.
Yes, absolutely.
And I can have you on some of the other shows I'm a part of too, as a guest.
That'd be awesome, dude. I love it. That's one of the things I like, is just to chat. And my wife is so tired of hearing all the nonsense I have to say.
Same here.
She'll put up with it. She'll be nice about it, but she's not interested. So it gives me another outlet.
Exactly how I feel. My wife is so done with hearing me talk about it. She's put up with it for years. She just goes, yeah, you told me this.
Yeah, that's my wife too.
But we can't do anything about that. So essentially she's telling me, tell someone who cares. But yes. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, everyone. We will see you next time, and hopefully we'll do this a lot more.